Hey, how's it going? And today I've been playing around with this verse prefabs and the scene graph, and I was trying to spawn a prefab, and I tried using this method here that this is shown on the most recent documentation that they have, but I could not get this way to work. And I got it working, but it ends up freezing up the system. So this is just experimental, but I want to show you that you can get it working, but it's not working 100%. So there's obviously room for improvement. And we'll just start from scratch and we'll walk through this together. So I'm going to go to island template. I'm going to go to blank, and I'm just going to create a new project here. It just takes a minute. This definitely feels experimental. Come up here first to the project settings and check this box. Well, you gotta pull this down, I guess. Check that box right there, and that will enable. How I do this is just get it working, and then I come back in and put the code, and it's just like 3 lines of code. Anyway, what I do is I'm going to right click and create an entity prefab. So this, in my mind, is a prefab, and it looks like it comes with an entity inside of it. Now I'm just going to call this my fab, just to keep things short, and I'm going to double click into it, and if I click up here, you'll see that it has an entity in it already. What I can do is add a component here, and I'm just going to add a mesh component, and then that's going to come in with the transform. Now I'm just going to raise this up in the air like that, and I can turn it so we know that that's, and I'll just go ahead and save this. So before you can spawn a prefab, you need to have a prefab to spawn, right? So this is the prefab, my fab, that we're going to spawn. And you notice I'm not putting it in the scene. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go and create a verse component. Now I've tried to get this to work in a verse device, and I haven't been able to. So I've just been struggling with this all over the place, and there's just very little documentation online about it. Okay, so I'm going to go add verse project component, and I'm just going to leave it called new component template and go create. Once it's created here, we can right click and create a prefab, and I'll just leave it called prefab new entity. And if I double click into it and I come to component, you'll see I have that. Oh, you know why I don't see it? Got ahead of myself. And this is something that's weird about it. Not really weird about it, but I have to compile it. I didn't build the verse code. That's why I don't see it. Now if I come in here and go to component, you'll see it right there, the new component template. Okay, so that's all we're putting in here is verse code. And this is just the boilerplate code. Now I'm doing this so that I want to make sure that it's just working. What I'm doing is working. So now what I'll do is let me save all. I'll just drag this into the scene. And what I'm going to do is here and go ahead and launch the session. And that might take a little bit. But if it's working, we should see 2 print strings come out of it. So I'll come back just as soon as this is finished loading up. Okay, so it finally started back up. Now here, if I go start game, now this is on simulate, right? So we should see print strings here. Now you'll notice I have the verse component in the scene. It all seems to be working. I can escape and end the game. And you'll see I get the print strings in the upper left corner. It just were on there for a second. So it's all working. No problems. I can go in the game and out of the game, right? So that's all good. So I feel like I'm on the right track. And I don't have this in the scene, but I have this in the scene, and it's working. Okay. As a matter of fact, if I double click here, and come into the code, I can make it so that these messages stay on the screen a little longer. So we'll just do duration equals 10 seconds. Okay, so that message stays on the screen a little bit longer. Now, what I'd like to do is add a verse component. Now, there's a couple places online where you can find documentation, and if you copy that code exactly, it may or may not work. Now, one thing that happens is that once you create a prefab, so here I've created this prefab called myFab, and it's just a cube, a mesh component here. You'll see it is just this, a component with a, I guess it's got a transform component and a mesh component, right? And it's an entity, right? Once that's done, though, if we come into the code and we come up here to assets, you'll see that it's created a class of my fab asset. You see that? So it's created my fab as a class. This has been done for us automatically. So with this done, we can create an instance of this class. So what I'm going to do is I already have the code written for this, and I'm just going to click and I should be able to paste. So this is the code. Here's where we actually create an instance of the class. So we go into the scene. This is all just based on the existing documentation. I click here and get simulation entity. It says returns the simulation entity parent for this entity. Get simulation. And so it wants a reference to the entity itself, right? It looks like that's what it wants, right? So I just have entity here. Can I click on this? The parent entity of this component, right? So this line of code is going to go and get the parent, the root, I guess, of this simulation. And I'm just calling it this sim instead of writing out simulation, right? And this can all fail. So it has to be called an if statement with brackets. So that makes sense, right? We're getting the parent of our, and we're assigning it to this simulation, right? Then here I make a reference to my prefab. Well, actually it says here prefab new entity. That's not the class, right? So if I come in here, it should be my fab, right? So here I'm going to change this because this is from before to my fab. That was from the previous time I tried it, my fab. And then here I'm calling that class that's in the assets, and I'm assigning it to, I'm calling it this fab, and then I'm referencing my parent, right? The parent of my entity, and I'm saying add entities, right? And then it looks like an array. I'm adding it to an array. Now I added this code here on the bottom because it was I couldn't get out of the game, and I thought this might get me out of the game, but you'll see it'll freeze up in the game, inside the game. So now I've got this. Now what's interesting to me about this is how just different it is from everything. So if I come up here and go build verse code, well, I see this. You see how that popped up, but it's dimmed out? I basically have to redo the whole game. So usually when you recompile the verse code, you only have to update the verse code. But here it seems like you've got to redo the whole session, and that takes a little bit more time. So I'll be back after it's done, because it takes like, I don't know, it varies, but it seems like it takes anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes for the session to update, even if you just make a small change. So I'll be back as soon as it's done updating. Okay, so it's finished uploading and updating. And look, if I come into the scene, just in edit mode, you'll see it spawned in the prefab. It's right there. I was excited at this point because I'm thinking, okay, I think it's working like it should. I didn't drag that prefab into the scene. I just coded it in, right? So everything seems good here, right? But I'm only in edit mode, right? So here's the issue that I'm having is if I go escape and go start game, it all seems good right here, right? I can run around. It's in the game. We spawned in a prefab using verse code. Okay. Now let's say I want to quit the game. If I go escape and in game, that goes away. But look, I'm stuck in game mode. I'm frozen. Now I have it programmed to quit automatically, but it's not going to quit it's just going to cut me out of the editor, I think, in 10 seconds. So anyway, I'm just stuck in game mode. There's nothing I can do. I'm like in stasis. So if I have to go Control Alt Delete, and I have to come over here and go to Fortnite and end the task. That's the error that they're talking about. But I thought this might kick me out of the game, but this didn't seem to stop it. So anyway, how would you say it sort of works? This code did spawn in the prefab, but then we have other issues that arise. Hence, I think we're still in experimental mode. Anyway, take care, and I'll talk to you next time.